two, one, action. Hi everyone, I'm here today to chat with Josh Hillis, and Josh and I have been, I guess, like chatting behind the scenes for, I don't know, it feels like several months now. We're trying to
Right.
to do this, and we were originally going to like just do, well, it is kind of going to be a chit chat, but at first it was just a, hey, we have a lot of overlap here in the types of things that we're doing for our people, and I thought, well, why don't we turn it into more of a interview type thing? So I'm going to quiz Josh on a few things that are coming from you guys. So I mean, you guys have provided some really good questions, and I also have a topic discussion that we will more of a cultural, I don't know how to say it, like describe it, but just a general feeling in the world of fitness, weight, body image. It sort of laps into everything, health and fat loss, and we want to cover that at the end. So stay tuned. We've got some really good questions, and but first of all, let's introduce Josh. And Josh, I'm really not really good. I know you've written is it three books? Is it, or two?
No. If you go published books, two. Yeah. But I had a couple ebooks that were pretty big, also.
Nice.
Tell
us a little bit about you and your
background. My name's Josh. I've been a personal trainer since 2004, and I started off real early in kind of like the kettlebell world, and thought that I was going to be training like jiu-jitsu fighters, but I ended up, I did jiu-jitsu at the time, but I ended up training all clients that were interested in weight loss. And so I got really interested in what makes that work. And so that got me into nutrition and exploring a bunch of diets, and realizing that like the individual diets didn't matter, and then having people calorie count and track and being like, okay, this works really well for some people, but like not most people, and why is that? And then that got me into habits, and I wrote my first book, Fat Loss Happens on Monday, kind of like about trying to apply, like trying to have people like keep a food journal and then like pull habits out of that. And then that put me in touch with some people who were like, hey, like a lot of what you're talking about is like kind of touching on psychology. So went back to school for psychology, worked with a registered dietitian for a while who was really into like hunger and fullness cues, learned about that. And that's kind of where I'm at now is what I'm really into right now is looking at the psychology of emotional eating. Basically, right? So like in a meta level, it's like behavior change and how do we do things that matter to us even when it's hard. And like specifically, like emotional eating is a really neat way to look at that, because it's very clear.
It's kind of I don't know, it feels like a messy area.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like how you follow kind of your interests and just go with like curiosity. Let curiosity take you places, and that's the best. I think that's the best way to do things, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, and also it was one of those things where like what I was curious about was like, why am I not helping more people? Like when I started with diets, I was like, oh wow, I can help a sliver of people, and then when I expanded out a little bit to like food drilling and behavior, it's like, okay, I'm helping more, but like what, and so it kept going like what am I missing that I can only help? And I feel like this is sort of like the overarching problem with the fitness industry, is I feel like the fitness industry is like really dialed in on like helping like the easy ones, or like let's optimize for the people that can already do it. Oh, yeah. And so my curiosity is right. And so my curiosity has always been like, what would it take to help the people that the fitness industry doesn't typically help?
Yeah, I think that's where our overlap is. It's like people like they're left behind or left on the sidelines. Like, I think, I don't know if you've noticed, like a lot of people internalize that and think it's their fault because they can't seem to get it to work for them. And unfortunately, it's just the way the game's set. It's set for certain people.
Yeah, they've probably had trainers that blamed them.
Yeah.
for like, you know, like they weren't given really adequate tools. And then the trainer that they had blamed them for not doing well with the inadequate tools that trainer provided them, right? So
Right.
like, I think part of the reason that it's so common to internalize it is because they've literally been taught to internalize it. They've been taught that it's their fault.
Yeah.
My stance, of course, is that it's a skills gap.
Yeah, I can see why. I can see why that is, and I'm curious. Like, as I see it, like before we get into the questions, I
Yeah.
can see it like what you're talking about. I see it in terms of the exercise stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
really struggle with that, and it's almost like. So I was redoing one of my home pages, and I was just talking about the as you enter into the health and fitness world for whatever reason, the premise you enter into or with is that you're broken and you need something to fix you or complete you, and then whatever. And
Yeah.
so unfortunately, it's never enough because that's
Yeah.
not the problem. People come
Right.
equipped and
Yeah.
resourceful themselves, and it's a coach or trainers, a guide to help them tap into those things. I think that's just from my own background, but I'm not major into psychology or anything, but
I
as a coach.
I think what you said is genius. Like that's so like the meta problem is that like you said, the underlying premise is that you're broken, is that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And oh man, and like you can see how that's like pervasive in everything. You can see how like trainers are taught to sell that way. Like that's the way most marketing is designed. Like
Yeah.
you're broken, we'll fix you. That's
It's
cool.
kind of disturbing and at the same time. And what bugs me was like you probably in the diet world the same way, but for me, it's whenever people are harping on about people being dysfunctional. Your
Yeah.
movements are dysfunctional. If you don't fix
Yeah.
this, you're going to get injured and you're going to get whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
let people just move. Like,
Yeah.
movement is therapy. Movement is good. Anyway, I'm going to
Yeah.
rant with this. Get me started.
No, it's true though, right? Like I'm in a couple Facebook groups of trainers, and like there's so much conversation over like how do I fix this broken client, and like what can I let them do, you know, um and there's very few of us, of like you and I, that are like, maybe let's just find movements that they can do and do those. You know,
Let's not let's not let's not create any negative associations with anything in particular. Like, just try to
yeah,
speak about the positives of moving your back, or
yeah,
like, so like, I
yeah,
don't, Travis Pollan as well.
yeah, yeah, love
Yeah,
him, yeah,
he's teaching a whole lot of great means, just tackling these pervasive
yeah,
problems that people like believe, like these belief in myths and things, all sorts of things.
yeah.
Great.
Well, so, okay, crazy parallel there, right? Like we're basically taught in that way that like our bodies are super fragile, right? Like don't do one thing wrong or you'll break it. And I feel like there's a parallel to nutrition where people are taught like that nutrition is super fragile. Like you do one thing wrong and you've blown everything, you know, like as if anything on either side was that fragile, is it just isn't effective.
Right.
It just really isn't effective.
Creates so much stress. It's like this all or nothing, or like
Yeah,
the zero sum mentality.
yeah,
Like if you did like a half, I always talk about this one, like half, if you only did half a workout, it feels like for many people that's only half the results. Like,
yeah.
because, and then what is a whole workout? Like, what is it's
Right.
so many levels to this, right? So we will get to, now let's go to, because we are a bit tight in time because,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
we'll get to
Yeah.
the questions because they're great questions, and I'm sure they'll result in great answers. And so Laurie from my Fitness After Life Happened group says that I'm fascinated by the process that regular exercisers use to keep themselves going. How do they rejig motivation so that once the initial gloss fades, they keep going? And I guess like maybe I'll touch on the second point. I feel Do you feel like, okay?
Yeah.
And then she commented right after that and said, oh, I also find the tie-in with behavioral economics really interesting in relation to behavior change. I've often wondered how the nudge theory developed by Richard Thaler,
Yeah, probably.
name might apply to promoting physical activity.
Okay, so I'll start at nudging and work backwards. So for people who don't know, nudging is this idea of like, let's set things up to make it easier to do the right thing versus the wrong thing, right? That's like the whole level. That's the underlying concept, and there's some really neat applications of it. The EU has a cool program called the Nudge It program, where they've got like multidisciplinary experts in obesity that are looking at like different ways to like nudge. And University of Edinburgh had a really cool course based on that I took. But what was interesting about like taking that course and looking at how like multifactorial they're specifically looking at obesity, but just looking at how big and complex an issue it is. And I feel like it was kind of like an interesting paradox to this idea that there's this like really simple solution, right? And I think that there are things we can pull from that that are super useful. Like, it is easier to self-regulate, really delicious foods if they aren't like sitting out on the counter where they're easy to see, right? That's useful, right? That's like the people that work in companies where they use like a nudge it philosophy. A lot of them will have like, they'll have like, you go into the break room and there's fruit out on the counter and there's, cookies and brownies in the cupboard. That's fine. That's great. It's useful, and it's nowhere near enough. It's like not even on the same planet as like dealing my perspective of like what we might want to look at, which is like, again, I typically help like what I like to study and what I like to work with is people are dealing with like stress eating and emotional eating. And if you are eating the cookies to manage the stress of having your boss yell at you or because you're procrastinating on a project, it's not going to matter if it's on the counter or if it's in the cupboard, right? Because that's your coping tool. And unless we have other coping tools, then those things are nice, but they're insufficient, right? So, and then that gets into the bigger thing of she was asking about motivation. And what we want to look at with motivation, I'm a huge fan of self-determination theory, which puts motivation in, I'm going to simplify it, in 4 levels. And so like the lowest level would be like reward and punishment. The next lowest level would be like guilt and contingent self-esteem. The next level would be like personally identified goals, which is really tough, which is what you want to talk about later. And then the last one is personally identified values, like the kind of person you want to be, the kind of character strengths you want to have, like that. And so the basic problem that most people have is they're using either like reward and punishment or like guilt and contingent self-esteem. Like, I feel good about myself if I work out. I feel bad about myself if I don't. I need to punish myself if I eat that thing. I feel good about, like that kind of stuff. And it just isn't very robust. It's a really delicate, that's a fragile form of motivation.
Yeah.
Whereas like the flip side is the kind of person you want to be, like digging in on your values, is extraordinarily robust. Right? Like, a lot of my clients are parents. They want to be a good parent. They've got a pretty good idea of like what it means for them to be a good parent. They want to be that kind of parent on a good day and on a bad day. Whereas like, if you're just doing reward and punishment, if you're having a bad day, that's probably not enough.
I see that. And even just the sound of it, like, what kind of person do you want to be? It's like inspiring almost. Like, you kind of just feel like, I wonder, even just when you're describing those levels, I'm like, wow, I've probably, I've done more or less all of those. And I think only when I became a parent did I start thinking about the person I want to be. And really just
Oh, that's cool.
aligning it with those values. Like with fitness, I don't do it with everything, mind you,
Yeah.
but certainly with fitness, because it was something that I think, you're stuck in that cycle, the reward, punishment, or guilt.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
that's a strong one.
Yeah.
Then the negative. So I guess the follow up I would have, and I guess relating to her first question is, how do you help somebody move towards being more motivated by the person that they want to be?
Ooh, great question. So first, they want to spend some time reflecting on what that is, right? And I usually start clients off with like a values list. And you can Google values list and probably a million will come up. Like Brene Brown's got a really good one. And it's just but it's just that it's easy to like circle words to get started, but eventually you want to move that into like more of like a narrative thing. And sometimes clients will actually start with like writing out the kind of person they want to be. But what we want to get at there is we want to get at like not what's another goal, but like what is the character strength? Do I want to be self-compassionate? Do I want to be conscientious? Do I want to be strong? Do I want to be connected? We want to try and figure out like a few simple things that we can actually use in the moment as a decision-making tool, right? So if I've got conscientious and self-compassionate, let's just say I've got those two, then if I've got a tough decision, I can actually use that in the moment and say like, what's the self-compassionate route to go? What's the conscientious route to go? And I can kind of work with that. And then we want to look at how do we be with all of the normal feelings that humans have. And it's normal to feel tired, it's normal to feel sad, it's normal to feel frustrated, it's normal to feel worried, it's normal to feel like all these things where you might say like, I would work out today if I wasn't frustrated. I would work out today if I wasn't stressed out. I'd work out today if I wasn't tired. But and then we can get like really specific to like, how do we take self-compassion and apply it to working out? Like, okay, so I'm in this position, it's the end of my workday, I've got a bunch of stuff on my to-do list. Like when I get home, I'm stressed out, I feel kind of overwhelmed, I've got these feelings, I recognize that it's normal to have those feelings with all the stuff that I've got going on. What is the most self-compassionate thing to do? And I might say like, okay, self-compassion is doing what matters to me even when it's hard and uncomfortable, right? So it's self-compassionate to go and start my workout, right? And so going and starting my workout, self-compassionate. And then let's say 10 minutes in, I feel great. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna rock. Cool. But let's say I get 10 minutes in and it's like, you know what, I'm super beat and like, I feel horrible. Then actually the self-compassionate thing is probably to call it.
Right.
And so the final thing of this is that we're taking these values and the values are flexible in the context of the situation that you're in. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So it was self-compassion to go and start, but like depending on like how much physical energy you have that day. And like, I mean, some days I'm so beat where I'm like, I might get hurt if I keep working out, right?
And I suppose it's hard to, in a moment, to have that conversation sometimes with yourself, isn't it? Like to be there enough. And I guess it's practice over time, like you get better at it. But I know it's with myself is what usually happens is I'll be going to bed and I'll be like, damn it, I was going to do whatever and I didn't do it. I'm like, then I'm already going to bed, so I'm super, super tired. So I'm like, try it. I'll just tomorrow. But I don't really make a proper plan. And so I'm like not proactive. Yeah. So how do you help people be more proactive?
So every week we build in obstacle planning. Every single week, like most of what a coaching conversation is, I shouldn't say most of it, an important part of a coaching conversation to me is obstacle planning. So that comes from two places. Either we look at last week and we say like, hey, like you wanted to do this, but like something else came up. And so let's create an if-then plan. So if that happens, then what are you going to do differently? The other way we can look at it is look at your schedule next week. What's coming up next week? And like, how do you create an if-then plan for the things that are like likely to come up? And the thing that's really neat about the research on that is that you don't even have to follow the plan that you came up with.
Uh-huh.
The act of recognizing obstacles makes you more effective and flexible in the moment. So a lot of times my clients will come up with a plan, and like half the time they'll follow the plan they came up with, half the time they'll do something else, but it was still something like more values driven than what they would normally do, even if it wasn't, because like sometimes, again, like in context, they realize like, hey, that the plan that I came up with doesn't make as much sense as this.
Huh. Give me an idea. I definitely think I should incorporate some of that into Equip with Strength, because I do have a plan B concept.
Yeah.
A sort of built-in backup and almost planning for, if this happens next week, then this is what I'll do. And so just to make that more concrete, this is something that will really help move you along that, over those obstacles or prepare for them. And so just you're building in that ability just to, and even if, like you said, like if you didn't do it, like your exact plan, I suppose like it gives you that creative practice to sort of think outside of the usual track.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where like, it's super individual. It is one of those things where like, people are like, oh, I got to that moment and like, I wasn't able to follow that plan. Okay. Maybe we need a better plan. Maybe the plan wasn't realistic. Maybe, or I have a lot of clients they'll come up with like 2 or 3 plans.
Yeah. That's
cool. They'll be like, I'll do one of these 3 things.
One of those, yeah.
But I love that you have plan B built in anyway, because you're already teaching people flexibility, right? They're already getting that. And like, for real, flexibility is robustness, and it's what has things endure.
Right.
Because life happens.
Yeah, it definitely happens. And you have to be able to zoom out and see the big picture. And this moment in time, even if I don't do my plan B, doesn't matter in the big picture. If I'm fine next week and the week after, it kind of, and that's something I'm glad that I had the struggle over the last couple of years of trying to be consistent again when life happened to me.
Yeah.
So it's really useful skill to have.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to a question. Well, there's what, we'll go for the first question from Elizabeth first.
Okay.
So Elizabeth, who is a member of Equip with Strength, asked, I'm not trying to lose weight, happy to maintain, but I've been helped by the approach of Gillian Riley. I wonder if he knows her work.
I don't. I don't.
Well, she treats overeating as addictive desire and uses knowledge of neurophysiology in her approach to overcome that. She helps people to understand the roles of the limbic system, in initiating the addictive desire, and then the prefrontal cortex. My goodness, as potentially able to make a choice to deal with the discomfort of not fulfilling the addictive desire, but recognizing that there's a choice and that we have freedom to choose. And so what can we actually do in the moment to deal with the discomfort of not accepting the addictive desire, if in case that is what it is? That's where Gillian Riley's approach is helpful. So I wonder if Josh has anything to say about the neurochemistry, neurophysiology of that moment.
Yeah. Okay, man. Great, big, amazing question. I am not familiar with that specific person, but I everything else in the rest of her question makes sense. So I can speak from the content. Food and addiction, man, that's a contentious subject. Research that shows that food is or isn't addictive hinges almost entirely on how we define addiction. My addiction studies professor, Harvey Milkman, like groundbreaking researcher, like amazing guy. He takes a very broad view of addiction. That's I believe it was altering your neurochemistry in ways that lead to unhelpful behaviors. So something like that. So pretty broad, right? So that would include things like, that can include food, that can include video games, that can include, like that can include a lot of things. Like if you're doing a thing to avoid a feeling or like to create a feeling, and you don't like where that's going in your life, then he would consider that addiction, right?
Okay.
And then we get into the limbic system stuff, and like I love the reward pathway as much as anyone, right? Like you eat something, then tryptophan goes to serotonin, which goes to enkephalin, which decreases GABA, which increases dopamine, and but there's this whole thing of like, it isn't always that simple, because there's like different. So again, this is Dr. Milkman's work. There's different qualities of addiction, or different coping mechanisms that could drive addiction, from like satiation, which would be like food and opiates, to arousal, which would be like amphetamines and cocaine, to fantasy, which would be like LSD and dissociatives and things like that, right? And so there isn't a huge dopamine bump there is a dopamine bump, but it's not that, we don't believe it's the driving factor. He doesn't believe it's the driving factor in addiction to things like opiates. That it has to do with coping style, and so that's a like a way bigger thing. But what we bring it back to with us is that is food effective at avoiding unwanted, like uncomfortable feelings and unwanted thoughts? Yes, it's super effective. Like it's a really great way to numb out for a little while, right? So it does work on that. Is it a way to like, can it be used as an avoidant behavior? Yes. Right. And that's my favorite thing to study. That's what it's all about. And for people that's the only coping mechanism that they have for dealing with those feelings, then the pull is very strong, because there is nothing else, right?
Yeah. So
we want we want to have other, like, the answer isn't about food. The answer is about coping with stress and emotions, procrastination and tiredness, all these things, right? And so I like to look at coping two different ways. There's stuff to do, which is like very much what we normally hear in the fitness world. And I think it's useful. Like, it is useful to go for a walk, to do a workout, to do some deep breathing. Like it is cool to like self-regulate ourselves by doing stuff that's healthy, right? That's cool. But then there's also, and this is kind of like towards the end of our question, like how to be with those things. And I take a very like acceptance and commitment therapy kind of perspective. And that would be that we need to find ways to learn to be with those. And that would come down to like a willingness to feel them, like an acceptance that the whole cornucopia of human emotions that are possible are all normal and okay. Because really, we've been told so often that like we're supposed to be shiny, happy, perfect people all the time, and that's not real. Right. Again, like my addiction studies professor was like, the only way to be up 100% of the time is to take drugs. He's like humans aren't wired to be up all the time. Like that's not our. So part of it's just like realizing that it's okay to feel bad. It's like when bad things happen, It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to be frustrated when things do, like those are all totally okay. And so at a base level, we don't have to fix them. And then if we don't have to fix them, then how do we be with them? And we be with them with things like diffusion, or like you could call it mindfulness. But like diffusion would be like unfusing from it, like noticing that you're having this feeling, like maybe labeling it, noticing the thought that you're having, and maybe labeling like where it came from. With my clients, a lot of times that it's like, oh, that's something someone told me as a kid about my body that's horrible. Oh, that's something I learned dieting. That's something a really horrible trainer told me. Sometimes that's something that one of my parents told me. It's something I heard in school, it's something I read in a magazine. Labeling it actually gives us a little bit of distance to not have to make it go away, but to realize that like it's not us and we don't have to act on it.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
It's really powerful, because it gives you a freedom.
Yeah.
Your agency to,
yeah.
You're not run by this. You're
yes.
able to get that detachment from it, but also recognizing that it's there. I did do some of the Headspace app, and one of their metaphors almost was like feelings and thoughts can just be clouds over your head, and then they float past. And I always visualize that when I don't always, but like when I'm more aware of it, I do that, and it helps because I realize it's just floating past. Like I don't need to do anything about it. Like just watch it. And realize it's not me, even though it feels horrible, but it's still blue sky above it.
Yeah. Well, so the thing about that is that can be really helpful with something with like emotional eating is to let people know that it is like a cloud that's moving past, but that like clouds move at different speeds. And like sometimes you look up in the sky, it looks like the clouds are just hanging there and they aren't going anywhere, right? That's okay too, right? Some of the clouds move by really fast, some of them move by really slow. And that's okay. We don't get to control how fast the clouds go, and we can't push them faster. But it's exactly what you said, that like they're just there. And I just want to point that out, because like the trap that people fall into is trying to fix it, is trying to make it go away. And it really is about like, it'll come and go in its own time. That cloud won't be there forever, but it might be there for 2 hours,
It sounds like if it's horrible if it lingers. But I suppose there's that exposure, isn't it? Because if that lingering cloud has been a trigger for somebody to then go back into a behavior, then you're exposing yourself to that feeling or to that presence of the cloud for longer. And it almost becomes like this discomfort with not being able to control.
Yeah. You're getting used to the fact that discomfort is actually a really normal part of being human.
Yeah.
And so it is exposure in that you're like, oh, I'm getting used to that being here. And it's also recontextualizing it, like humans are sad sometimes. Humans have thoughts that they don't want. If you've been dieting for 20 years, you're going to have diet thoughts that are unhelpful. Like it's like noticing that those are going to kind of be there, and also like getting used to them being there without having to do something to fix them or change them. Because like that's what emotional eating is, right? It's just like, this feeling shouldn't be here. This thought shouldn't be here. I can't be with it. I'm going to eat to numb it out.
Right. Or I'll go on my phone, or I'll drink, or whatever it is gets you to.
And all of that's okay. Like, I also want to say that like all of that's okay. It's about frequency. Like I'll get clients that that emotional eating is like, has been their only coping mechanism all of their life.
Yeah.
Right. And I always try and remind them that the goal isn't to never emotionally eat. Everyone eats to sometimes, you know, but like, it doesn't fit my values to do it all the time, you know? Yeah. So anyway, I just always like to remind people that like, you're allowed to be human, and the goal isn't never, you know?
I suppose that's where your, you know, the perfectionism comes in as well. A big thing, because you're struggling with that, and you think that you have to get it all, hit the spot every single time, like you're doing. If you like have, like I'm thinking as well, like, you know, your workouts, say you've got a good run of like 4 weeks of like hitting your workouts, and then 1 week you didn't get them all in, and it just, the feeling of discomfort that creates sometimes is just like, what does this mean? And I don't know, like some people might fear that this is them turned now and they're going back down that path.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I can relate
which is like, I always tell people that if we could keep like a 6-month running average of the stuff that they're doing, that would be the important part, you know? So like, if they skipped a week completely, it wouldn't change their 6-month running average all that much.
Right.
You know, by the same way that if they did 7 workouts that week, it wouldn't matter all that much.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It might matter if they're doing 7 workouts a week for like ever. They might not be able to do that. But so I guess like what we were just talking about, it does tie into our final topic. But there was one other question, which kind of, I don't know, it's probably takes us off track a little bit, but I'll ask it anyway, because I know that other people probably want to know something along these lines, from Elizabeth, and then we'll get back into agency and autonomy. The other question from Elizabeth is about ketogenic or fat adapted diets. It seems to be a thing now for people to say they're fat adapted, but not necessarily keto, and that it has benefits for endurance training, amongst other things. I know Josh suggests some of lower carb days in his plans. I think it was your first book. But wonder whether he thinks a low carb approach is beneficial for us at all, whether or not someone is aiming to lose weight. Or whether or not someone is aiming to lose weight.
Yeah, okay, great question. And to be super clear, I did recommend like carb cycling and stuff in my first book. I don't anymore. Man, I've learned a lot since that first book. And one of the biggest things is I just got a lot more into research, you know? And so the research that I'm super interested in on macros is satiation and satiety. So like feeling full during a meal and feeling full between meals, right? And if we want to get like the simplified version is the macro profile that'll make it easiest for you to feel full during a meal is going to be like protein, carbohydrates, and like some sort of like fiber, vegetables, right? Vegetables or fruit, right? And then what's going to keep you full between meals is going to be protein, like some fibrous vegetables or fruit, and fat. Right? So what you end up getting is like, you look at all the research when it comes back down to is like having balanced meals. And you could get a little nerdy about it, where if you're like, oh, I don't feel full at meals, I could add a little more carbohydrates, or if I don't feel full between meals, I could add a little more fat. But I mean, we're still talking about balanced meals, right? And again, mostly what I want to teach people is how to regulate their food intake mostly naturally, you know? And so what really works is like, if you look at Harvard's healthy eating plate, Harvard School of Public Health has a healthy eating plate that's about half vegetables or fruit, quarter protein, quarter carbohydrates, and some healthy fat, right? Which actually doesn't look a a whole lot different from USDA's MyPlate, which doesn't look a whole lot different from Canada's Healthy Eating Guide, right? What they all have in common is about a quarter protein, about a quarter carbohydrates. Depending on who you ask, tablespoon of fat or more, and a bunch of fruit and vegetables, right? And works really well. You know, but it's one of those things where like I try and my big concern is people being able to feel full and satisfied.
Yeah, makes sense. The thing that fascinates me about the question of not necessarily Elizabeth's, but when most people I encounter talk about keto or carbs in particular, it's a fear of them making them fat, which is another nice lead-in to so so I was, one of my questions to you was in our chit chat earlier was, so it came to my mind because I was in a group. It was called the Intuitive. For some reason, in it, it's intuitive eating or something, and they have very strict rules about not talking about fat loss.
Yeah.
Not talking about diet, language, so trigger words, and it's very, very strict, like black and white, and it got me thinking, and I looked at certain photos and memes and things that they post, and it's this whole idea that of not to be fat phobic.
Yeah.
But within that group, there are people who want to lose weight, and they are struggling. And I understand the struggle, being the whole body love movement and things, you know, healthy at every size. And there's a struggle for some people to own their desire to lose weight without coming up, without either offending people because they're being fat phobic in some way, but also it's confusing because you don't know whether or not you want to lose weight because it's your choice or because you're being programmed by society, and so you don't do anything and you feel horrible because you're like, now you're ashamed that you want to lose weight.
Yeah. The struggle is real.
Yeah.
The struggle is real. I mean, it's hard because it's hard because there isn't a well-defined middle, you know? Like the diet world is like really clearly defined, and then like health at any size and intuitive eating is really clearly defined. And I personally feel like I'm closer to the intuitive eating and health at any size side, but they wouldn't consider that. They would put me all the way in the diet world because I help clients lose weight, right? And that's not a valid goal there. And it is one of those things where like, I believe in autonomy. I think people should be able to choose their own goals. I think it's actually, there are healthy ways to, this is one of those things where like, I can see the hate mail coming right now. But I think there are healthy ways to lose weight. I think if someone is exploring their values the whole time and they're getting real about all of their commitments in their life the whole time, and they're practicing flexibility and self-compassion the whole time, then I trust them to eventually, like within like a year, be able to sort out what they want for themselves, you know? And I've had a lot of clients that are like, oh, I want to lose 60 pounds. And in terms of like over the course of a year and like going over the values and all the commitments, all the things that matter to them, they lose some portion of that and are like, you know what, actually I'm fine. Right? Yeah. Like whatever portion of that they get, and it's total. And the reason that I feel okay with it is because they set what that is. And I've had people at every possible level of that, like, stop. and say like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm not eating my feelings. That feels good. I'm eating in a way that feels healthy. I'm getting lots of vegetables. That feels good.
Yeah.
I lost some weight and like, that's cool. But also like I'm eating in ways that like I can do forever and it doesn't like impede on my, like doesn't get in the way of like my family time or my work or like, they're like, I think this is my spot.
I like that. I like this. This is my spot. I think it's very hard for people to own their spot because they've been told what spot it. They've been told the spot.
Yes. Stop. Man, our industry keeps telling people what they're where they should be and what they should want.
Right.
And so like the thing that I want people listening to get is that like for people to find their spot, that's like a lot of conversations over like a year. It's not like someone like sits down and like journals for 10 minutes and figures it out.
Right. Yeah. If only. If only.
And if it takes 2 years, that's fine, you know? But like, and the other thing that's funny is that is like getting emails from a client like 5 years later, and they're like, hey, you know, like here's where I was at when we stopped, and like I kept reflecting and it changed again.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Like that's awesome. You know, that's awesome.
Yeah, you kind of, when you describe that place, I think ultimately that's why people get into health and fitness. Like why people, it's not the goal. The real goal is to be content. It's this peaceful contentment in your, as regardless of whether or not you're whatever size, or regardless of whether or not that there's some ability to be content as you're walking through this crazy life that's going to throw things at you anyway. Nothing is like, I remember thinking like when I was super lean and I was like, oh, this is like, I can maintain, because I like maintained it for like a couple of years. I'm like, well, this is me now. I'm going to be like this forever. And I just remember like then the next sort of 5 years took me on another journey, and I'm grateful for that. But I just laugh at my old self now, thinking I was so arrogant. Like, what did I think? Like, so now I you know, that sort of, I see that the struggle for people to really, what's it, like, I'm thinking of certain people who are nitpicking details to try, and maybe if I adjust this, or maybe if I try eating like 100 fewer calories a day, or I'll try upping my exercises, or, you know, really small details that are actually feeding into the pattern of discontentment. It's hard to, how do you sort of, I suppose that's where it becomes into that sort of values area, to try to guide them to see what, like, the vision of who the person they want to be, the person that they see themselves.
So like I actually look at that as like avoidant behavior also. So like, oh, like I feel bad about whatever, and so I'm gonna eat, right? But I have just as many clients that their avoidant behavior is nitpicking at like idiosyncratic diet things, right? And so they can avoid like whatever existential crisis is going on in their life by like reading about another diet, or like planning their next thing, or whatever. Like it's another way to like not have to be with that. Like being human is really hard, right? Like, you know, we're so often told that like if we just got our body right, it would solve all of our problems around like belonging and meaning. I mean, like you look at the way it's marketed, it's like it's really trying to solve broad problems that it doesn't solve, right? And so part of it is just it's just being real about like that, like it's so funny. I'm thinking of have you ever seen Midnight in Paris?
No.
Oh,
I don't know.
it's a fun movie, and at one point, the main character talks about like what he was doing was trying to like he was essentially like trying to avoid parts of his life that were like kind of unsatisfying, and he realizes that like life is a little bit unsatisfying, right? That like, and it's kind of real, right? It's one of those things where like I want clients to get at like, oh wow, this belonging that I want to have, this connection that I want to have, I can call someone I love, or I can spend some time with my partner or whatever. And like this meaning I want to have, like I can reflect on my values and figure out what matters and like take an action today that's in alignment with, but at the same time, there's still all the feelings that people have. And like sometimes we're sad and sometimes it sucks. And so it's just my client experience where clients are using that like diet nitpicking to avoid having to feel what's like kind of human.
I wonder if I can totally, even just in the same thing happens in workouts, and it's just you saw my thing about workout and exercise perfectionism.
Yeah.
So part of it is one thing, but I think another part of it is this maybe like a level of doubt about the process, like it's not working, and
oh yeah,
there's no realistic. I don't think there's really a realistic measure for how fast results. I think people know results can take time, but in reality, we still feel like they should be happening faster. So and then why are they not? I'm not doing it right. There must be a missing piece, and then you go looking for a missing piece.
Yeah.
Then once that's in place, you have to wait again. You see, and then it's uncomfortable to wait it out and be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And I always think about like the tiny things that you could do, like. It probably won't move the needle that much. It won't move the needle more than if you're consistently doing, a couple of workouts a week for a year, than if you're changing it. The difference is between the two scenarios is you might end up with the same results, but you probably won't see that you've got the results in one of those. Like you won't, you know what I mean? Like you won't see that you're where you want to be, because you've never honed that skill of being content. Is that the skill of being content, or
absolutely
that?
And that's, man, so I feel like clients that like if we don't do the values work, then people never get there, no matter what they get to.
But, yeah.
Like no matter how lean they get. And like when I used to work in the gym, I had a lot of clients that just really wanted to get lean, and no matter how lean they like really, I had clients that people were asking like, are they a fitness model? Like, are they on the cover of a mat? And they still didn't feel done. Right. And so it is one of those things where like exactly what you just said, if we don't practice feeling content, and like the way I look at that is I look at like self-compassion, values, and how much can I focus on, am I taking actions that are in line with my values? And that's kind of got to be enough.
Enough. When the ability to say enough is so like people will try to get to enough, but enoughness doesn't require trying. It requires resting and letting go. That is
so okay. That's brilliant. Okay, that's super brilliant, because again, that's like values and context, right? So like, let's say you had a value of what we'll say whatever your values were, right? And the valued action 3 days a week is to work out, and the valued action 4 days a week is to rest. Those are both in line with your values. And it's different on different days. And you can take the action that's in line with your value every single day. So, but it's just one of those things where like the rest day is just as in line.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's where people, we don't do that, right? We don't have that piece. We have the working part and not the resting part.
Yeah, we're
So,
terrible at rest
yeah.
as a culture.
Definitely, definitely. And it's just got me thinking, oh, I need to like, that's a really good piece to include because you have to say it's enough. And so have you any pieces of advice, your parting wisdom or anything as we kind of, and also tell everyone where to find you and where to where to buy your book as well, because it's a great,
Yeah.
if this stuff interests you at all, like this is, that is, your book is basically going into that more.
Thanks. My book is called Lean and Strong: Eating Skills, Psychology, and Workouts. It's available at Amazon. Parting stuff. I just say, tell people to focus on basics, like eat balanced meals, put your fork down between bites, try and notice when you're getting full, or I should say practice noticing when you're getting full. If it's in between meals and you've had enough food at your meals, then like take a look at why you want that snack. And if it's, if you feel a hollow feeling in your stomach, then like go eat it. But if it's because you're stressed out or tired or bored or whatever, then look at ways to be with that, or like do a thing that kind of like takes care of you around that.
I love that. Thank you. Good wisdom.
Thank you.
So a
This
hole
is
in your
fun.
a hole in your stomach, you can eat. A hole in your heart, no.
That's a great way. That's amazing. That should be my next.
Your next book.
That should be my next book. Hollow feeling in your stomach or hollow feeling in your heart. That's amazing.
Well,
I'll put in there title by.
Yeah. I'm glad to have helped with your
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and
thank you. This is amazing.
Can't wait to do it again. Definitely, I'm sure we'll get some more great questions from people, and yeah. So, chat to you soon, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye.